Anakin Skywalker's return in Ahsoka delighted fans across the board. However, his first known appearance since Return of the Jedi also puts to bed one of the biggest debates in Star Wars history. Strap yourselves in because the story of Anakin and Vader has just been taken to a whole new level.
Greater than any Jedi.
However, some fans aren't going to like this.
Impossible.
We need to start by looking at why Anakin's return has changed everything we thought we knew about the character, how it completely closes down the Chosen One debate, and what the future could possibly hold for Anakin Skywalker, because I personally feel his most recent appearance in Ahsoka is the most important yet, not only enriching his story so far, but also opening up possibilities for his story to continue after his death. And this all comes to light due to the role he plays in the Ahsoka show, where he's teaching Ahsoka one final lesson to complete her training, which was live or die. Now, whilst this scene does a lot for the character of Ahsoka, which results in her becoming Ahsoka the White, if you really stop and look what's going on, it's actually revealing more about the character of Anakin than it does for Ahsoka. Now, to really understand what Dave Filoni is trying to show us here, we need to first understand Anakin's journey so far, and this all begins long before his first appearance back in The Phantom Menace. Now, we already know the Jedi at the time were aware of a prophecy of the Chosen One, which was said to defeat the Sith and bring back balance to the Force, and on an unexpected trip to Tatooine, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan encounter a child, with a midichlorian count higher than that of Master Yoda, who was widely believed to be the strongest Force user in existence at that point in time, which results in them bringing him into the Jedi Order for training. Now, the Jedi were initially hesitant to train Anakin due to his age and the attachment he had formed to his mother, and yes, it's true, if they took him at a younger age than what he was in The Phantom Menace, then he would be less attached to his mum, but it wouldn't have made much of a difference in the long run. Anakin was already born with the seeds of the dark side firmly planted within him. They just needed feeding, and that's exactly what happened over the course of his time training as a Jedi. Being attached to his mother only to lose her in the most horrific way truly triggered his descent into darkness, and this is taking place in Attack of the Clones. And it's also around this time that he began to question the Jedi's teachings, believing they were holding him back, and in hindsight, they were. The truth is, the Order didn't know how to handle Anakin. They'd never had a member of this potential in their ranks before, so he was trained and treated as a regular member of the Jedi Order, albeit with a tag of the potential Chosen One bestowed upon him by many. Now, Anakin was outgrowing the Jedi. He had learned how to use the light side of the Force, but as his powers grew, so did the call of the dark side. The prophecy spoke of one bringing balance to the Force and defeating the dark side, not succumbing to it. So, was it wrong? Now, during the Clone Wars, Anakin met three beings known as the Mortis Gods: the Father, the Son, and the Daughter. The Father represented balance in the Force, the Son darkness, and the Daughter the light. It was actually the Father who further elaborated on this prophecy of the Chosen One, and that this individual would be the one to actually go on to replace him and become the next Father, the Keeper of Balance. Now, Anakin declined the opportunity and carried on his Jedi path. And while it's hard to argue the wisdom of a being such as the father of Mortis, his offer to Anakin was premature. Yes, Anakin possessed the power required for the role, but he had yet to achieve balance within himself. He had the dark side within him, but he had yet to embrace it. He was still walking in the light, despite the darkness calling to him. The Father's view of the prophecy of the Chosen One differs to that of the Jedi's. It's a matter of interpretation. With the limited view of the Force that they possessed, they believed to achieve balance, the dark side must fall, whereas the Father believed and demonstrated that balance required the presence of both the light and the dark side. Now, Yoda is the wisest member of the Jedi, and it's no surprise that he also came to question whether the Jedi did misread the prophecy.
That misread could have been.
However, he was still unable to interpret it correctly, and by the events of Revenge of the Sith, Anakin had largely learned everything he needed to know in the light side of the Force, with his master Obi-Wan telling him he had taught him everything he knew.
I have taught you everything I know, and you have become a far greater Jedi than I could ever hope to be.
Now, this is the midway point of Anakin's journey. Faced with the potential loss of Padme and their unborn child, the call of the dark side becomes unbearable to the point where he finally makes that switch and becomes Darth Vader. Now, with Vader himself believing he killed Anakin...
You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
It's very easy to see the two as being separate entities, and for the next 23 years, he continued down this darker path, embracing and learning all the dark side had to teach him, fueled by his hate of the Jedi and his loss of Padme. However, the Force works in mysterious ways. In what would be his final years as Vader, he discovered not all was lost that day on Mustafar. The unborn child in which Padme was carrying was still alive, a part of Padme, and also a part of who he used to be survived, and despite his efforts to turn his son to the dark side, it was his son that aided the return of Anakin Skywalker. Now in Return of the Jedi, after spending approximately half his life in the light and half of it in the dark, Anakin Skywalker breaks the chains that binded him in his last act and saves his son and defeats the Emperor, bringing the time of the Empire to an end, fulfilling what many interpreted as the prophecy of the Chosen One. But did Anakin actually fulfill the prophecy of the Chosen One, or were the events foretold still to come? Because if you look at how different the characters were to one another and how Vader addressed Anakin, calling him weak and believing he had destroyed him, it's easy to believe that the two were indeed separate entities within the same body. However, it is no coincidence that Anakin became Vader when he was 22 and remained Vader for 23 years, pretty much dividing his life into two equal parts. And it's finally revealed within Ahsoka just what was really going on all those years. Anakin and Vader were never separate entities, they were simply two sides of the same coin, with it only being Vader's belief that Anakin was no more, a belief that was also shared by others that knew Anakin and encountered Vader like Obi-Wan. Now in the Ahsoka show, Anakin appeared to Ahsoka in a time when she needed him most, and some fans thought this was all just played out in her imagination, but this wasn't the case. You see, Anakin in this scene with Ahsoka remembered when Luke said he wouldn't fight him, and he references it to Ahsoka when she says, "I won't fight you."
I won't fight you.
He says, "I've heard that before."
I've heard that before.
I will not fight you, Father.
Ahsoka's mind wouldn't have known that to show that to her. And also towards the end of their training session, he nods his head, and at that moment the world between worlds begins to vanish around her. Indicating that he had control over the environment the entire time. It becomes quite clear that Anakin has now achieved balance in the afterlife. He spent half of his life in the light and half of it in the dark, and now after death he has completely immersed himself in both sides of the Force. Vader didn't die when Anakin transcended into the Force. Vader lives on as Anakin did. However, Vader isn't all of a sudden a good guy and Anakin isn't all of a sudden a bad guy. They're in the middle. Anakin has complete control over his emotions, and he can switch between Vader and Anakin as he pleases, which can be seen multiple times during their training. This is a version of Anakin that we've never seen before. Now, if my suspicions are true, I believe he has now taken up the mantle of the father that was offered to him years ago during the Clone Wars, and it doesn't really matter if he's no longer alive himself, as the Mortis Gods actually withdrew from the mortal plane a long time ago, and they simply manifested themselves to fit their surroundings. Anakin has demonstrated that same ability here. The prophecy of the Chosen One was widely believed to mean the end of the Sith. The Jedi Order believed that, and with Palpatine's survival, many questioned if Anakin really brought balance to the Force, wondering if his whole character arc was for nothing, and some fans were speculating that perhaps he was the Chosen One for a point in time, and Rey was the Chosen One now, perhaps it's an ongoing thing, and this was a view shared by those that worked on the sequel trilogy. But I'll just remind you of what Yoda once said, perhaps a prophecy misread could have been. The Jedi interpreted the prophecy to line up with their views of the Force. The Father had already shown us this isn't the case. The Father's appearance indicated balance can only exist with both sides of the Force being present, and this is something that Luke Skywalker realised himself at some point between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. Lord San Tekka also mentions without the Jedi there can't be balance in the Force, so the same would work the other way. And it's worth noting that Lord San Tekka and Luke went on many adventures together. Now, somewhere between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, this understanding of balance filtered through the rest of the galaxy. Perhaps it's a lesson learned from Anakin himself in a story that's still to be told. Anakin achieving balance in the afterlife and going on to replace the Father as the keeper of balance himself was his destiny. And that is exactly what the prophecy foretold. Good and evil can and will exist, and they will fight one another, as they always have, but Anakin is there to ensure there isn't too much of one side and not enough of the other. Now, whilst I don't believe this was George's original idea when he included the prophecy of the Chosen One, as he did explicitly mention that the prophecy was to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. The Mortis arc in the Clone Wars was a project that was greenlit and worked on by George Lucas himself, so I'm of the opinion that these seeds were sown a long time ago with George's blessing. Anakin is the Chosen One here. He spent his entire life preparing himself for a role after death. All his experiences were necessary to get him to where he needs to be, and it wouldn't have happened if he spent his life in the light as Anakin. As a result, the Force would have been thrown out of balance at that point. But in more recent years, as I mentioned earlier, those involved with the sequels have come out and said the Force does fall out of balance from time to time, as a way to make sense, really, of Rey defeating Palpatine. Now, George never intended Palpatine to survive, nor did he intend any other Jedi to rise up to defeat him. I believe Filoni has realised this and is gone on to give the prophecy of the Chosen One a greater meaning than destroying the Sith, ensuring Anakin's overall importance to the galaxy remains intact, a legacy that can't be replaced. Whilst other heroes can rise up in the future to defeat the bad guys, there will only ever be one true being keeping balance, and that's going to be Anakin Skywalker, even after death. With these bold reveals coming out of the Ahsoka show, and the way the show hints at a power greater than Thrawn's, which Balin's out searching for, I believe if it is a story they follow through with, and I do think they will, then it's very likely we'll see Anakin play a more prominent role in the future once again, especially if the theories going around at the moment are true, and the power calling to Balin is Abeloth. Then Anakin, as the father alongside a yet unknown son and daughter, which could actually be Ahsoka, will have to come together to prevent Abeloth destroying literally everything. Let me know, do you think the prophecy of the Chosen One has taken on a new meaning more than just defeating the Sith? Remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you're new, I'll catch you in the next one. May the Force be with you.